Do you have any ideas on backpacking? Would it be best to take a lot of dried fruit and soak it overnight? Or is that better than trying to take rice?
The question was about backpacking. Would it be better to take a bunch of dried fruit and soak it overnight? Is that better than rice? You've given me a pretty low benchmark there. Rice isn't food. Don't eat rice. I would never eat rice. I mean, but dried fruit isn't really a very good alternative. There are times where, like if you want to do a long backpacking trip, I used to do these backpacking trips of a week or so out in the wilderness. We'd carry everything in, we'd have whatever we needed. It would be difficult eating optimally. What I would probably do, and this is something that's come up over and over again, personally, if it were just me or somebody else whose body was really efficient, I'm perfectly fine going 3-4 days without food. Like I feel strong and no problem at all. So what I would probably do is minimize my clothes and gear, right? There's no need to carry any cooking equipment, right? No need to carry any of that stuff. Minimize the amount of clothing I'm carrying. Really minimize everything and carry as much fresh food as possible. And eat that fresh food in the order at which it's likely to decompose. So the things that last longest are the last things you eat. And if it means I've got a couple days where there's no food, I'll be fine. Now, I know, like most people I know, wouldn't be fine at all, right? They skip a couple meals and they're in serious pain. Maybe you know people like this, right? They go a day without eating and they can't move. They're in so much distress. That's because their bodies are detoxifying, right? Once the body's clean, this is not an issue. The other possibility would be to do some research, or maybe if you're going to some place you already know, would be to forage for food when you get there, right? Find as much food as you can. In the summertime, wherever you are, there's probably ample food that you could eat. There are greens that are safe to eat, not so many. Most are toxic, but there are some. And there might be wild fruit available if you know where you're going. But it's difficult.
If you were going to bring some nuts as like a safety backup, since they're calorically dense, lightweight, compact, and everything, what do you consider to be the best nut or seed option? Yeah,
and that's, it's a good point, because probably better than dried fruit. Dried fruit, without going into that whole conversation, which is sweeter, a raisin or a grape? Raisin. Someone say grape? Where do you buy your grapes? Raisins are usually sweeter, right? And you know why? It's because they take a hypodermic needle and inject each one with sugar. Right? That's why they're so expensive, raisins, because it's a lot of manual labor, right? No, they just take grapes and dry them out, okay? And when you take a grape that was 84% water and you dehydrate it on average down to between 20 and 25% water, what happens to the sugar content as a result of what's left? Say again? Yeah, it's going to be much more concentrated now. So it tastes much sweeter. So it's much more difficult for your body to deal with that intense sugar. And when you're consuming, remember, bowel movements, stool is on average 75% water. Okay? So if you're eating something that's 20 to 25% water, what's it going to do to you? It's going to take the water out of your body, okay, as you move it through. And soaking it first doesn't change that very much, because the water you're soaking in, you're never going to take a raisin and recreate a grape by soaking it. Okay? You've forever changed it. It no longer has that cellular water in it. And so it won't hydrate you the same way. And maybe if you soak them first, maybe it'll dehydrate you a tiny bit less, but it's still dehydrating. It's a completely different thing. In fact, I shared recently how after a retreat, a 1-week retreat that we did in a previous location, not here, in a previous location, where each night I prepared a meal for the guests, which included some sun-dried tomatoes or some dried fruit, like maybe some dried apricots in a dessert or something like that, as well as some nuts and seeds, which are generally dry, pretty dry. After eating one meal each day for 1 week, my hydration dropped by 5 points. That's a pretty big change. That's just one meal a day for 7 days. So eating dried fruit means your body is dealing with a much higher glycemic load. I mean, dates, right? We're going to cover this later on, but anything with a glycemic load over 20 is considered high. And most fresh fruits are 0 to 9. Most fresh fruits are 0 to 9. The very sweet fruits are typically going to be between 10 and 16 or so. Okay, that's going to include bananas and mamey sapotes and jackfruit and durian and things like that are very sweet, right? How many of you know some of these fruits? Everyone knows bananas, right? These are all things that taste really sweet. They have a moderate glycemic load. 20 is high, 20 and above. Most dates, the way that they're typically sold, pretty dry, they're in the 40s in terms of glycemic load. That's what happens with dried fruit, okay? Very high glycemic load. So it's taxing on your body and would be far better to avoid. But nuts and seeds would probably be the backup that I would choose. If you're going to be out for a while, you could bring 2 pounds of almonds, a pound of almonds and a pound of sunflower seeds, probably the two that are easiest for the body, almonds and sunflower seeds. You soak them first, and hopefully wherever you're going, you're going to, if you have to bring all your water, and you're going to be in trouble. So hopefully you're going to places where you can get water, potable water on site. Springs, streams, whatever. You soak them first in a container and then drain them and rinse them. So you've eliminated the enzyme inhibitors. And now you've got something which, again, you don't want to eat a lot of at one time. I mean, I prefer not to eat any of them at any time. But if you eat a little bit, if you have nothing else, because they're so calorically dense, you would need relatively few. So you could probably go a long way on a couple pounds of dry nuts. I mean, the calories there are significant. So if that's all you had with you, let's say you've eaten all the fresh fruit, now if you can find some edible leaves and combine them with some nuts and seeds that you've soaked, okay, you could probably relatively easily get through 2 or 3 days that way. I had an experience once. It was probably 14 years ago, actually around now. It was early spring. I was a resident. I still have residency in Panama legally, and my girlfriend at the time was Canadian and did not have residency. And in Panama, you could extend your visa. You could get a 90-day visa like you get here without doing anything. Like if you have a U.S. or most European passports, I'm not sure about Australia, it's the same or not, but with most U.S. and European passports, you don't need to do anything. Costa Rica wants tourists. It's our #1 industry. Most people in the world can come here and spend 90 days without having to apply for anything. In Panama, it was the same, but you could then extend it for another 90 days fairly easily. You can't do that here, not very easily. But in Panama, we extended her to 6 months, and at her 6-month anniversary, she needed to get out of the country. So we planned it around a little break we had, just a few days, and we drove up to Costa Rica. And we, on the way back, we stopped at this beach for lunch, and this beach had perfect waves. So the next time we had a few days, I said, hey, let's go back up there. So we drove up there. I taught her how to body surf. We go up there to body surf, and the waves are amazing. But I thought, we'll find fruit when we get there. We don't need to carry a bunch of fruit with us. We're going to be in a tropical country. We get there, nothing. It's a little tiny town. There's no fresh fruit available except in Panama. I don't know if you're aware of this, Therese, but in Panama, the Chinese people they came to Panama when they actually brought Chinese people in to build railroads over 100 years ago, because Chinese invented the railroad and they were the experts And so they brought Chinese people in, and people stayed. And the Chinese families now run every independent grocery store, every independent hardware store, and every independent auto parts store. So there was and in every little village, there's at least one Chinese family that has a little mini supermarket where they sell mostly crap, right? It's, they sell bottles of crap and they sell packages of crap. And that's pretty much it. And they don't have any real fresh food, but you can get crap in different packages. Whatever flavor crap you want, pretty much. But they had apples and pears. Right, here we are in a tropical country. There's no bananas, there's no mangoes, there's no pineapples, but they've got apples and pears in a refrigerator, right? Now, the Chinese are smart, and the apples and pears in the refrigerator last a long time. They don't have to worry about stuff spoiling, because the fresh food, that doesn't have a very long shelf life, right? Little villages, there may not be much turnover, right? So that's all they had. We didn't want to eat that stuff. So we thought, well, there's palm trees lining the beach. I've got a machete in my trunk. We'll just eat coconuts. We drank the coconut water, and we ate coconut flesh.
Can I say a time out? So of course I've got a machete in my trunk.
Of course. If you live in Central America, it pays to keep. Actually, I don't have one in my car now. I probably should. We lived on top of a mountain. There was one way up, and it wasn't unusual in a storm for a tree to fall across the road. There were several times I was out with the machete for an hour hacking my way through a tree so I could move it so I could drive through, because otherwise I wasn't getting home, right? It came in handy sometimes. That's why I kept it in the car. But we lived on coconut water and coconut flesh for about 2.5 days. And we both felt so incredibly heavy. The only solid thing we're eating was coconut flesh. We were about 90 minutes from Liberia. Liberia? Panama? I think David, which is the second biggest city in Panama. It's very close to the Costa Rican border. And we were about 90 minutes away. And so I said, come on, let's go get some food. So there's no place else. So we get in the car, we drive up to David, we watch a movie, we go to a fruit stand, we load up with fruit for the next day and a half, and we come back, and we spent the next day and a half on the beach eating mangoes and papayas and watermelons, etc. But that was my only experience trying to live on something. Coconuts, they're considered fruits botanically, but they're really like nuts. Very dense, high in fat, high in protein, difficult for the body. And our bodies were going, no more, don't touch this stuff. We should have just drank the coconut water, okay? But lesson learned.
How did you get up the palm trees?
Well, I can climb a palm tree, just climbing it, but we didn't need to. They fall on the sand. Yeah, and coconuts last as long as the outer shell's intact. They'll last quite a long time. They'll be fresh for months. So it was no problem. There was enough palm trees on the beach that finding coconuts on the sand was easy. Yeah.
What about
Does soaking nuts actually rehydrate them, or is it the same story as dried fruit?
Yeah, it's not about rehydrating them.
I know.
Because,
But
well,
does it have any
no, I mean, it just like dried fruit, it's not cellular water, it's a completely different structure. The water in food is clustered differently than the water we're drinking, and it's much easier for the body to use. What we're doing, the reason we soak nuts isn't to rehydrate them, it's to reactivate them, because nuts and seeds have enzyme inhibitors that prevent them from being enzymatically active. We're just trying to get them enzymatically active so that our bodies don't have to provide all the enzymes, because with real raw food, if it's enzymatically active, the enzymes in the food are doing much of the activity of breaking it down. We want those enzymes to be active.
And you recommend removing the peel of almonds, yeah?
Yes. Although I wouldn't necessarily always do it. It would be a good idea to always remove the skin, right, the brown skin on the almond. One of the most important reasons why it would be a good idea is it'll slow you down. Okay? It's easy to shove those things in your mouth, and they're very dense, mostly fat, way too high in protein, and lots of calories, You know, it's hard for the body. If you soak them first, you can scratch the thing off with your thumbnail and then peel it off. And it's going to slow you down. It's going to take you a minute or two to peel each one. Maybe a minute, 30 seconds. I mean, it takes you no time to reach into a bag and shove a handful in your mouth. You know, if it takes you 30 seconds to clean each one, you're going to go a lot slower, and you're probably going to realize that you're satiated much sooner. Because, you know, if you eat fast enough, before your body recognizes that you've had enough, you've already had too much. Okay?
How much time would you soak them?
Nuts should be soaked for about 12 hours at least, and seeds are okay with, you know, 6 to 8. Seeds like sunflower seeds. So if you're going to use them, they should be a very small percentage of your intake, and you want to understand that consuming more than a little bit of any seed is probably going to be too much.
Let's say you're on this backpacking trip, you have your almonds and your sunflower seeds.
Yep.
At one time, like one meal, how many almonds and sunflower seeds would you eat?
I don't know. I mean,
Just a range.
well, you know, again, it depends. I mean, my guess is, for myself, because my body is pretty sensitive to these concentrated fats and proteins, I would probably not touch them until I ran out of fresh food. And if I could forage and find all the food I needed, I wouldn't use them at all. You know, if I wound up needing them because I couldn't find anything else, I'd soak a bunch and I'd eat as little as I felt like I needed to. I don't know what that, if you have nothing else, I mean, I don't remember how many calories an almond has. Does anybody have an idea? I have no idea. My guess is it might be as many as 10, but I don't know. And that doesn't sound like much, but, you know, but an apple is only 50, 45 to 50. So it might only take, maybe it's between 5 and 10 almonds to have the same number of calories. I wouldn't personally want to eat enough almonds to meet my normal caloric needs. I'd rather eat less. But that works for me. I'm perfectly fine eating very little. Not everyone is. Hopefully, you'll all get to that point. Okay? It might happen after this fast. It might require additional fasting to get there, where your body's efficient enough and clean enough that if you consume nothing or very, very little, you still fine. You still feel fine. I personally would probably not want to use them. And I'll tell you, I mean, these things are addictive. Has anyone noticed that? You start to eat them, it's hard to stop. I'd just as soon not start most of the time. Hi, enjoying my videos? If you'd like to learn much more, check out the Academy for Vibrant Living, where our Vibrant Health course will teach you everything you need to know to take your health to an amazing new level. And if you'd like to turn your passion for health into a lucrative career, check out the Health Coaching course, where you can become a professional, certified health coach and help as many people as possible see amazing results.